Gospel today comes from the Gospel of Matthew, and there we read, "In the time of King Herod, after Jesus was born in Bethlehem of Judea, wise men from the east came to Jerusalem asking, 'Where is the child who has been born King of the Jews? We observed its star at its rising and have come to pay him homage.' When King Herod heard this, he was frightened, and all Jerusalem with him, and calling all the chief priests and scribes of the people, he inquired of them where the Messiah was to be born. They told him, 'In Bethlehem of Judea, for so it has been written by the prophet, and you, Bethlehem, in the land of Judah, are by no means least among the rulers of Judah, for from you shall come a ruler who is to shepherd my people, Israel.' Then Herod secretly called for the wise men and learned from them the exact time when the star had appeared. And he sent them to Bethlehem, saying, 'Go and search diligently for the child, and when you have found him, bring me word so that I may also go and pay him homage.' When they had heard the king, they set out, and there ahead of them went the star that they had seen at its rising, until it stopped over the place where the child was. When they saw the star that had stopped, they were overwhelmed with joy. On entering the house, they saw the child with Mary his mother, and they knelt down and paid him homage. Then, opening their treasure chests, they offered him gifts of gold, frankincense, and myrrh. And having been warned in a dream not to return to Herod, they left for their own country by another road." Let us pray. Lord, may your words only be spoken and your words only heard. And we do ask this all for your love's precious sake. Amen. Please be seated. Well, today we want to ask a simple question, and the simple question is, what makes you happy? What makes me happy? What makes us happy? We actually know a lot about what makes us happy. We've known a lot about what's make people happy for a long time. Their old wisdom from thousands and thousands of years is very insightful about what makes people happy. And the new wisdom that comes through many of the social sciences and empirical studies that they currently conduct, verifies so much of what the old wisdom taught. And so we live in a time where we know more than ever about what really makes people happy. And we're going to spend the next few weeks looking at some of those things that we pretty well know, both in terms of the ancient wisdom, the types of things, for instance, that Jesus taught, and how that wisdom is verified by modern science tells us about how to be happy. Now, most people know how to be happy. Some people don't. And the way that you know if you don't really know how to be happy is if you keep trying different things, and this morning you're not really happy. And so if you're here and you feel like something's missing, if you feel like, boy, there's just some piece you can't quite figure out, you feel like happiness is a bit elusive, you know, bits and tastes of it, but you can't quite get a hold of it, well, then it may be that actually you really don't know how to be happy. And there's probably more people in our world who really don't know how to be happy than we might first think. But more likely, you do know how to be happy. It's something you've known for a long time. The bigger problem for most of us is just that we forget. We forget what makes us happy. And so often the reason that we forget what makes us happy is that we're marketed to. And we're marketed to hundreds of times every day, and every day we receive literally hundreds and hundreds of messages, and all those messages tell us you are not happy unless you get this thing that we don't currently have. And so we forget how good we have it, and we think we need something else, and we pursue things thinking that those things will make us happy. But the first thing about happiness that we want to say, so right off the cuff, is something that you know, but which we often forget. I forget all the time. I need reminded of all the time. When we forget this, we make bad choices. But the first thing we need to remember is that happiness is not a what at all. Happiness is a who. Happiness is not a what at all, but happiness is a who. You know this as you reflect back on the Christmas holidays. When you look back on Christmas, what are the things that really stand out in your mind? Is it the things that you received? Is it even the food that you ate? No, it is most likely the people that you spent time with, the things that you experienced with the people that you saw. Every year we keep a book of Christmas memories, and at the end we write down various memories that we want to remember. And my younger daughter wrote down a Christmas memory this year, and it's when we were driving over to church, and actually I think maybe we're going over to my brother's house. My brother lives in Herndon, which is right that way, and so we go down the Algonquin Parkway, and then there's that little street that right after Lowe's Island cuts across to 7, right by the Corvette dealer, and then you come down 7 and then turn on Drainsville right there. Well, that little cut road in through there is pretty dark and pretty narrow, and we were driving down there, and I really wasn't even going fast because there's a big speed bump in there. But there was a guy who was he had this great big black garbage can, and he was bringing it down to the road. He was almost to the road, and Linda says, all of a sudden she says, "Slow down! Don't hit that guy walking his horse." And she was completely serious. I mean, she thought it was sort of dark, and this is the problem with getting older is we don't see as well. And she saw this big, dark garbage can, and she thought the guy was walking his horse across the road. And so she said, "Slow down, don't hit that." And the kids and so that was the one thing Mary wants to remember about this Christmas. Forget any presents, forget anything else, forget all the food. She wanted to remember how her mother thought a guy walking, bringing the garbage can was a guy walking a horse. And she was really afraid I was going to hit it. So, I mean, you probably haven't experienced something like that. And those are the joys of Christmas. Those are the joys are the who's that we share life with. A guy by the name of Martin Seligman, who is probably the foremost researcher on happiness, and he has actually changed his thinking on happiness. He began by writing on happiness, but with his latest book, which is just called Flourish, it's probably been out 3 years now. He said actually we don't really need a theory of happiness. What we need is a theory of well-being. And he said if you move from a theory of happiness to well-being, well-being never occurs in isolation. See, we think of happiness as a feeling that somebody has in here or in here. But he says real well-being is never an isolated thing. It's always something that we enjoy with other people. And so the way he says that is this. He says, very little that is positive is solitary. When was the last time you really laughed? The last time you felt indescribable joy? The last time you sensed profound meaning and purpose? The last time you felt enormously proud of an accomplishment? Even without knowing the particulars of these high points in your life, I know their form. All of them took place around other people. Other people are the best antidote to the downs in life and the single most reliable up. And he says, doing a kindness produces the single most reliable momentary increase in well-being of any exercise we have ever tested. So happiness is more about who than what. And if we get that wrong, and we get that wrong all the time, because there's people that just consistently want us to think it is about what, and if we don't think about that, sometimes we buy into that, then we make bad decisions, and we start forsaking the who's so that we can have more of the what's. And that never takes us where we want to go. Well, the second thing about happiness is that happiness, if happiness is more about who or what's, then to be happy, happiness is having a who or two. And that's true. Happiness is having a who or two in our lives. If happiness was about what's, we'd have our happy what, and we'd all be happy, and it wouldn't matter what anybody else said or did to us. But the truth of the matter is that we can have absolutely everything. We can have a fancy house, we can have a nice car, we can take great trips, but if the primary relationships of our life are out of sorts, nothing else is going to make us happy. I mean, if the primary relationships of our lives are out of sorts, then it doesn't matter what we have, it doesn't matter what's in our life, we're not going to be happy. One of the ways I heard this expressed, and this just rang so true for me, it says that it's really hard for parents to be happier than their most unhappy child. And I think that's probably really true. It's really hard for a parent to be happier than their most unhappy child and it doesn't matter what else you have. You can have everything else. But if a child's struggling, a parent's going to, and why is it? Because we're created to find our happiness in relationship with who's, not in what's. And so no matter what we have, if a who's not working, that affects the quality of our life. A guy by the name of Tom Rath wrote a great book last year. If you're looking for a book to read, this is a pretty good one. It's called Are You Fully Charged? And I need to reread it. In it he says, if you allow society to keep redefining your happiness for you, you'll enter a race that you have no chance of winning. Everywhere you turn, something is suggesting that you need something else to find true contentment and satisfaction in life, to persuade you to consume more than you have today. To persuade you to consume more than you have today, marketers will continue to make a case for why you'll be happy if you can just get to the top of the next hill. But getting caught up in this race only ensures that you'll never win, because you get to the top of that hill, and then it's the next hill. So, again, another principle, happy what always leads to happy what else. Happy what now always leads to happy what next. Happy this hill, if I can just get to the top of this hill, I'll be happy, always leads us to the next hill. And that's just a race we can't win. And then the final way that we know this is true, and I started saying this one way, And I took some of these things, actually. This is loosely based on a sermon preached by a guy by the name of Andy Stanley. And he said it one way, but as I thought about it, I think there's a better way to say this. And this is the way that he said it. He said that one of the ways that we know that we were created for who's and not for what's is that when we look at our regrets in life, our regrets are relational, not possessional. So if you think just for a moment, I'm sure a regret will come to your mind. I don't have to think very hard to come up with a regret or two. And when we think about those regrets, they're not revolving around things we don't have. They're revolving around relationships that aren't how we'd like them to be. And they're not going to be fixed by buying something. They're only going to be fixed by time spent with people. They're only going to be fixed by, if they can be fixed at all. And so I think that's definitely true, but I might say this a different way, a more positive way. The way I would say it is, if we think about our life's greatest achievements, we're going to find that they're relational and not possessional. See, when we look at the greatest achievements of our life, we don't think, oh, it's my house, oh, it's my this, oh, it's my that. No, when I think of the greatest achievements of my life, I think in terms of the people in my life. I mean, not achievements, but I think of the greatest things in my life. I think of the people in my life. I'm not thinking of things at all. I'm thinking of people. And when I think of the greatest achievements, I don't think of things I did on my own. I think of things I did with teams of people. The sweetest things in life aren't things we just do on our own. Those don't end up being very sweet at all. The sweet things that we do in life are things we do with other people, and it's the heroic group effort. It's the team pulling together that makes them so sweet. And so, whether we say it's our deepest regrets are relational, not possessional, or whether we say that our greatest achievements are relational, not possessional or even individual, they point to the same thing. Happiness is the result of the who's in our life, not the what's in our life. And that's actually the message of this morning's gospel. The wise men, part of the reason that they were so wise is they knew this. And they knew that what would make them happy in life was a who. It was the Savior that was born in Bethlehem. And so they were willing to give up everything else to find this who. Well, what does that mean for us? How do we make this practical? A few things I'd like to say about that. One, I'd just like to read you a quote. This comes from a guy by the name of, well, I didn't think that's who that was, but it was a Pittsburgh Steeler. I think I have the name wrong here. But this is what he said. What has the game given me? He says, the game's given me my teammates. You want to talk about what the game takes away from me? It takes away my teammates. And I thought about that, and I thought, you know what? We could actually substitute a word for that. What has life given me? Life's given me my teammates. What has life taken away from me? Life's taken away my teammates. And so it's the wise person who realizes there's a very sweet season in there that we're given to enjoy the people who we're with, and it won't necessarily go on forever. And sometimes people are taken from us in tragic ways. Sometimes people just move on for good reasons, but for whatever reasons, the greatest thing in life are the teammates that life gives us, that God gives us. The hardest things in life is losing those teammates. And so it's the wise person who says, this right now is a sweet, sweet season. And I'm going to enjoy this season, not by getting all caught up in the what's, pursuing the what's, but enjoying and devoting myself to the who's in my life. And I want to suggest 3 questions that we can ask in the year to come that will help us do that. And the first question is just to say to a spouse, to say to a child, to say to a friend, to say to a coworker, to say, what would you like me to do more often? A simple question. What would you like me to do often? And this is more about fine-tuning relationships than about big things. This is about rituals of connection, all right? And often when people feel like their relationships have gone flat, that there must be something more to this relationship, that, it's that people have begun to miss those rituals of connection that make their relationship so rich. And so when we say, what would you like me to do more often? It might be something like, It might be something like, well, you know what? When we were first married, you'd always get up first, and even though you drink tea, you'd put on the coffee pot, and when I got up, you'd have a hot cup of coffee poured for me. But in the last few years, you've gotten busy, and you just forgot to do that. I just wish you'd make me a cup of coffee again, because that always touched me. At the end of the day, when I come home, man, when we were first married, you know, you just used to rub the back of my neck, and just occasionally, if you just do a little bit more of that. I remember a year ago when Father Rob, he preached a sermon about the 6-second kiss, and he said, let everything else go and just kiss for 6 seconds. And you know what? When you took the time to actually do that, that was pretty good. I felt like at least for those 6 minutes a day, we connected, but that passed pretty quickly. I'd like you to do that a little bit more often. But when we say, what would you like? That's what we're not talking about big things. We're talking about the little things that fine-tune our relationships that we easily lose sight of. And it's just helpful when other people say, you know, when you used to do that, I know you don't know this, but that meant so much to me. I'd love it if you did a little bit more of that this year. And then I think a second thing to say is, and we should really ask this of anybody we care about. We should say, what are your hopes for 2016? And see, the truth of the matter is, so often we just become like ships passing in the night. We're all so doggone busy. We just become like ships passing in the night. And we don't really know what's going on inside people. And that question, what are your hopes for 2016? For 2016, what do you really hope for? See, that's an inner life question. You can't begin to answer that question without sharing your inner life. One of the great things about having my older daughter home is that she hears the sermons. One of the bad things about having her home is that she puts the sermons in practice, as soon as we get home. And Christmas Eve, I talked about being physically demonstrative. A lot of people think I am physically demonstrative because I am in public settings, but actually privately, I'm not at all. And so Christine comes home and she wants to be physically demonstrative, and it's like, okay, I didn't really mean that, but actually it reminds me that I need to be. I mean, so it's actually really, really good. But after this sermon, she said, Dad, well, what are your hopes for 2016? And I didn't really feel like talking about that. So I said, well, tell me what your hopes for 2016 are. And I know that's not really the right thing to do. And eventually I did get back to talking about what mine were. And she said, well, you know what? Part of what I really hope for 2016 is that my life won't be so built on male validation. And I so appreciated the way that she shared her heart like that for me. And it really encouraged me, because I thought there's so much insight in being able to say that. I really hope that not so much of my life is going to be built on male validation. Just a beautiful thing, a beautiful moment. So what's going on in your inner? Tell me about your hopes for 2016. Great question. And then a final question is just, how can I help you? How can I support you? What can I do? Again, the best part about being in relationships with people is doing life together. And yet so often we end up doing life apart because, frankly, we get caught up in the what's. And so, how can I help you? How can we be a team? How can we be the team that we dream to be? And how can we work together? That just becomes a very, very important question. Some years ago, and I read this every year, and some of you have heard me read this before, but when I was 42, my Uncle Bob sent me an email on my birthday. And I read this email, it meant a lot to me then, but the truth is, this Christmas I came to understand that I never really understood it as much as I have now. I'll say a word about that in just a minute, and then we'll be done. But here's the email that he wrote. He wrote, age 42, the best time of your life. You're smarter than you've ever been, and your memory is still intact. It was nice when it was. You're still strong. Not as strong as 20 years ago, but still able to do a full day's work, and smart enough not to have to do a hard day's work. The kids are still home, and that's the most important and exciting job we ever have. And is it ever? The wife is still pretty. It's sort of like the commentators for the football game saying, Robbie, this next set of downs are the most important of the game. They say it with a profound inflection in their voice, and it is the most important series in the game because it is now. Age 42, Robbie, the most important year of your life. And what I understood this year, is I understood how true that is. And I understood it in the context of Christmas. Because to be completely truthful with you, in the last few years, the joy of Christmas has just gone out of my life. I mean, the joy of Christmas has just gone somewhere. And I think it happened when my kids grew. I mean, when my kids were young, and I always tried to be intentional. I didn't just try to be, I was intentional. I mean, I had enough people say they didn't remember their kids growing up. I said, I'm going to remember. But even when you're intentional about remembering, it's so fleeting. But when my kids were young, I loved Christmas morning. Christmas was so great. Experiencing Christmas through their eyes, buying them presents. Man, it was just, it was the single best gift I may have ever been given. And so when that time in life passed, all that was left was Christmas as a ton of obligations. And for a priest, that's really the case. And often a whole bunch of things go wrong at Christmas, and it just sort of, it doesn't make it a very pleasant time. Or it didn't seem like it did. And then this year, what I realized was that the way I look back on when my kids are young are the way that in 10 years I'm going to look back on life now. You see, my kids might not be young, but they still come home. And we still and I can talk to them in ways I never have. And so there's a beauty in Christmas here with them. You know, my wife and I, we might not be as young as we were, but we're still young. We can still do all kinds of things together. And, you know, that's going to continually change. And so these are the best years. Just like those are the best years, these are the best years. 42, Robbie, it's the most important year because it is now. And I think what my Uncle Bob would say is he would say this. He would say, 2016, friends. It's the most important year because it is now. Amen. Amen.